messages, and we won't be able to attract people. But if it becomes a lifestyle, just reaching the people around us, you don't need an exciting message for our church to grow. Amen? And today, I was trying to, the theme I had was reaching Judea. I wanted to encourage and encourage. And so I was preparing for a message about reaching Judea, but then I went into the book of Exodus. And as I was studying the book of Exodus, the whole message changed. And more than reaching Judea, when I was focusing on the book of Exodus, it's on just spiritual warfare. And so I felt like the Lord was kind of challenging me to give that message instead of, reaching Judea. But it's important. So my message for reaching Judea, let's reach Judea. That's the whole message. Right? And but what I saw in the book of Exodus was the Pharaoh, and I was studying the Pharaoh in Egypt, and what I saw was the tactic of the devil in our life. Moses came to Pharaoh and said, let God's people go. And the Pharaoh will reply, who is the Lord? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. And he got so mad that instead of letting the people go, he decided to put more burden on God's people. The Pharaoh added, in Exodus 5, he took away the straw for making bricks. That was pretty much the job of the Israelites in Egypt as they were in slavery. They were making bricks. I mean, really purposeful life. But that's what happens when you're in bondage. You don't live a life of purpose. And so you're focusing on making bricks, things that's kind of, it's just, there's no meaning. And what the enemy does, you're focusing on something that has no meaning when you're in bondage, and the devil gives you more burden in doing that work. And I should have done the research, but somebody told me, if you take away the straw, it's harder to make bricks. That's what I heard. I go, there's straw in bricks? I didn't know that, I really didn't know that. But if you take away the straw, it's just, I guess it's a lot more difficult to make bricks. So the Pharaoh didn't let the people of God go. So God brings a couple of plagues to set his people free. The Pharaoh says then, because of the plague, goes, okay, I'll let the people go. But then he changes his mind. Okay? In Exodus 8. But later he changes his mind. He says, no, I'm not going to let the people go. So God brings a couple more plagues to set his people free. And he can't take it anymore. And the Pharaoh says, okay, this is the condition. Go, sacrifice to your God here in Egypt. Do it here. Why get out of Egypt? Stay in Egypt. All right? But Moses protests. He goes, no, we can't. We have to go out of Egypt to worship. Then the Pharaoh again puts another condition. He says, I'll let you go to offer sacrifice to the Lord your God in the wilderness, but you must not go very far. Okay, if you're not going to worship God in Egypt in bondage, then what you should do, okay, just go a little bit, a mile or two from Egypt and worship God there. But, okay, the plague lifted. Guess what the Pharaoh did? He changed his mind. No, I'm not going to let the people go. So God brings few more plagues to set his people free. The Pharaoh said that he will let the people go. But then he changed his mind again. After a few more plagues, the Pharaoh asked Moses, okay, who will be going if I let the people go? And Moses says, everyone, man, woman, even the livestock, is going to go with us. And the Pharaoh replied, no, only the men will go. in Exodus 10. And he changes his mind again. And then there's more plague. And then he says, okay. I will allow men and the women and the children to go, but not the livestock. Okay, no livestock. But then the Pharaoh changed his mind again. And at this time, the final plague comes, death of the firstborn. And the Pharaoh finally let the people go. And they're gone. Guess what? He changed his mind again. This time he gathers the army to go after the Israelites. Now, the devil likewise, okay, wants to keep you in bondage. And what I got from this passage is this. One, he does all he can to keep you in bondage and slavery. Right? All he can. What that means is, think about the Pharaoh. He's losing every resource in his kingdom by keeping the Israelite there. He was losing every resource, but he doesn't care. Why? More than the resource that he has in that dark kingdom, he hates you. That's what the Bible says. He hates you, and he wants to destroy you. He wants to keep you in bondage. That's the devil. And if you start to walk in freedom, he will try to make you stay close as possible to that bondage. He will. The Pharaoh says, worship in Egypt. Stay in the land if you're going to worship God. Don't go outside of Egypt. So what he's saying is it doesn't make any sense to me. He says, he makes you believe worship and bondage could live in partnership somehow. Right? Worship and bondage, you could live in partnership. Somehow legalism, shame, hatred, and fear can partner with worship with God. I will go, sometime you go to a church. I mean, everybody is the image conscious. If you go to a church that's all image conscious, they care about their image. So they care about the car they drive, how big their house is, how much salary they make. When you go to that church, what do you feel? Nothing. You just want, I'm not going to go back to that church. But that's what the devil tries to make you do. Bondage and worship somehow, you could partner. You go to a church. It's a very legalistic church. Very legalistic church. It's all about do's and don'ts. What you wear. Just what you eat or, how you act. If you go to that kind of church, what would you say? I don't want to be in that church. But there are churches like that. And so they fell into this lie. Worship and legalism and ritual could partner together. You go to a church, it's just immoral church. There was this one guy in this church, and I said, I was kind of warning, don't sleep with your girlfriend. Don't sleep with your girlfriend. And you know what he said? All the leaders are doing it in my church. Worship and immorality, sexual, it's okay. But that's what the devil wants you to believe. Stay in Egypt and worship God. But if you have to leave Egypt, what does the Pharaoh say? Don't go too far. Just don't go too far. What he tries to do is he tries to keep you at the edge of bondage. You know why? Because if you're at a cliff, okay, and you're at the edge of the cliff, how easy is it to make you fall? I mean, really fall off the cliff. It's pretty simple. Okay, and you're going to fall off the cliff. But say you're 2 miles from the cliff. Right? Further, much further. well, it's pretty hard. He has to drag you to the edge, and throw you off. But he wants you not to go too far. And if you have to go, then what he says, the Pharaoh says, is just take the men, but not the women and not the children. What I got is that if you're in bondage, you know how he keeps you in bondage? By isolating you. Because just the men go, you guys stay here. You know how he keeps you in bondage? By division. He tries to divide the family. This is what's going on. You see the conflict in the family? That conflict is there to keep you in bondage. Isolate you. Anytime I hear somebody says, yeah, I just worship God and me, but not with people. I go, why not? Because I don't like people anymore. No. Discipleship is God and me. What am I with? No, I don't want to deal with people anymore. I never seen somebody do well spiritually when they have that attitude. Because he wants to isolate you. Then what he says is, okay, you could take the men, the women, the children, but not the livestock. Not the livestock. Don't take the livestock. And what's so significant about the livestock? Well, Moses told him, in order to worship for the Israelites, for them to worship God, they had to have livestock. Because they sacrifice animal as an act of worship. And so what I believe the devil wants us to believe is, if you want to worship, make no sacrifice. Make no sacrifice. Nowadays, to us, this is sacrifice. Sitting on the chair. Oh, I'm sacrificing. I'm sacrificing. This is, King David went to the threshing floor of Araunah to build an altar to stop a plague. And he went to Araunah and he made an altar to worship God. And so David asked Araunah, to the threshing floor, was his threshing floor. He said, sell me the site so that I could build an altar. And Araunah, because he was the king, said, no, take the land. It's free. You could have the whole land. And I will provide the oxen for the burnt offering. I'll give you the wood. And I will even give you the wheat and grain as an offering. So, David, you don't have to provide anything for worship. You know what David said? David said, no. I insist on paying the full price. I will not take for the Lord what is yours, or sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing. That costs me nothing. What worship is not just a little string making, okay, I can't worship. Okay. Couples, you guys got into a fight coming to church. I can't worship. No. This is important. I'm going to worship the Lord. Your child's cranky. Oh, you can't worship. No, this is important. I'm going to worship the Lord. I will not take for the Lord what is yours, or sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing. That's the devil's tactic. But I don't wanna end there. But talk about the Lord. And what I saw in the book of Exodus is so encouraging. The Lord won't give up on you to set you free. He is committed to setting you free. Say that to your neighbor. God is committed to setting you free. And what's interesting is, the people of God cried out for salvation, was crying out for freedom to get out of slavery. And the Lord was moving and doing things when the people of God didn't see anything happen. Right? Because for years before, okay, Moses came to Egypt, when the Israelites didn't see it, they were in slavery. They didn't see God move or anything. There was no miracles, and they were in slavery. But God was preparing Moses. He was raising him up to become the deliverer. The people didn't see anything, but God was moving to set his people free. God was doing something. That's why it's good to have the Bible, because some of you might go, God's not doing anything. But because we have the Bible and we have the book of Exodus, we go, yes. We see the spiritual realm. God is doing something. But from our perspective, it seems like, no, he's not here. He forgot. He's not hearing our prayer. And you might have the wrong conclusion. God doesn't care. God is maybe helpless. I'm in too much of a bind here, and he can't really help me. It's too big of a problem for God. Or you might think, when you're in bondage, I believe the Israelite thought, the Pharaoh, he's too powerful. He's just too powerful, so that God can't really do much. Or you might come to this conclusion as you're in bondage, God doesn't exist. And when you are being attacked, and I'm going to just speak the truth, hold on to this truth. God is doing something. He has been working in the past. He is working now, and he will work in the future. And God's people said. Number 2, it doesn't matter how hard the devil attacks you, God is still working. The Pharaoh took away the straw in making the brick, creating more bondage, more difficulty. But the good news is the Lord was working to set his people free. And this is what the elders of Israel believed about God during that time. They said, you have made us obnoxious to the Pharaoh and his official and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. Their attitude was, okay, we're just going to die. That's the goal. We're all going to get killed. And Moses, the very man that God was raising up to deliver the Israelites, this is what he thought. He starts to question God. Why? Why? Have you ever fallen into that? It's difficult. There's a lot of bondage. And you go, why? And that's what Moses was doing. Why? Lord, why? Why have you brought this trouble on this place? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on this people, and you have not rescued your people at all. And, many of us, you went to the renewal retreat, and after the renewal retreat, victory is ours. We could overcome. Right? But then you go home. And you realize, okay, there's still attacks. But don't fall into what Moses fell into. What? He says, no, ever since, okay, there's nothing that has happened. No, God wasn't finished yet. He wasn't finished. He's just beginning here. Beginning the work of freedom. God didn't give up. Human beings and leaders didn't have the answer, but the Lord has the answer. He has the plan, and he has the power. And this is what gives me so much comfort, because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves about the bondage that's in our life. We put a lot of pressure. I believe we should be excited. We should have faith. We should believe. But in the midst of bondage, we put so much pressure. You know where that pressure comes from? I don't think we need to put that kind of pressure on ourselves. Okay, I need the answer. I need to have the strategy. I need to have the solution. I have to know what I need to do exactly to overcome. But you know what? Moses didn't know. God would come to Moses, and I'm going to bring this plague. Go to the Pharaoh and tell him, I'm going to bring this plague. If you don't let my people go, I'm going to bring another plague. Oh, no. So in the midst of bondage, okay, God will, in his timing, give you the answer, give you the strategy, give you the way, give you the miracle. And what's encouraging is even when the situation is up and down, God is still working. This is so encouraging to me because, the Pharaoh, if I was the Israelite during that time, I would be so depressed. Okay, one day, yay, the Pharaoh's going to let us go. Tomorrow, next day, Pharaoh changed his mind. A week later, yay, the Pharaoh says he's going to let us go. Next day, he changed his mind. 2 weeks later, Pharaoh's going to let us go. Change his mind. Next time, he's going to change his mind. He's going to change his mind. It is very difficult, and that's what the devil uses, the up and downness. Sometimes it's very discouraging. You see the up and downness in relationships. You see the up and downness in situation, up and downness in your spirituality, up and downness in work. And it is depressing. I remember somebody, talking to this one guy who'll come to me, okay, everything's okay with our marriage now. It's going to work out. There's a change. A week later, Pastor Sam, everything's falling apart. Everything. 2 weeks later, Pastor Sam, there was a revelation that came to our marriage. And it's gonna change. That's 3 weeks later, the revelation's gone. And it's hard. Isn't it hard? The up and downness of life. But this is the good news. It didn't matter. God was still working on God's people's feet. Even if the whole dark force of hell is attacking you, because the Pharaoh changed his mind again, and he took the whole army of his Egypt army, horses and chariot, to bring God's people back to Egypt. But the Lord is committed to your freedom. And when they were at the Red Sea, as the Egyptian army was coming, he stopped the Egyptian army, and he split the Red Sea. It was the most memorable miracle. And he destroyed the Egyptian army, and he rescued God's people. He did one of the greatest miracles of that time. And how do I know God is committed to our freedom? He did a greater miracle for us. God sent his only son, Jesus, to rescue us from bondage, to pay the penalty for our sin. And this is the great tension that we're going through. It's like the devil is tugging one way, and God is tugging the other way. The devil works to keep us in bondage. The Lord works to set us free. And the lesson for all of us as we're living in this tension, this is the lesson. Don't stop believing and don't stop doing good. That was the lesson that the New Testament church gives us. They were loving God. They were loving one another. People were coming to the Lord in Jerusalem. And in one day, everything changed. There was a persecution that came upon the church of New Testament church. Stephen, a man of God, is falsely accused and stoned to death. And the apostles are put in prison. Families are scattered. But you know what? If I was the New Testament church, I see all this stuff going on, I go, maybe God don't care. Maybe God's not here. Maybe God doesn't have the power. But the New Testament church, they didn't have that attitude. You know what their attitude was? We need to go to Samaria, and share the gospel. So Philip, as he going, he just lost his house. He lost everything he has, and he's running away, and he's going to Samaria, and he's sharing the gospel with the people in Samaria. And there's a revival that comes in Samaria. A great revival. So the New Testament church focused on moving forward, not backwards. See, the Israelites, they were supposed to focus on moving forward to go to the promised land. But the first generation had this problem. They kept on wanting to go back to Egypt. They kept on wanting to go back to bondage. And so God had to raise up a second generation nation who wanted to go to the promised land. And when we're talking about going from Judea, we're in Jerusalem, now we want to go to Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. I'm not talking about numbers here. That's not what I'm talking about. How many people came to the church, how many churches were planted, how many missionaries we sent. Because what I see, when we are able to go to Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth, there's greater freedom. There's greater freedom. The reason you can't minister to your children is because there's still bondages in our life. Because growing up as a children, the devil attacked us with our family. And so when you have children, you can't minister to your children. But what God wants to do is bring more freedom. Freedom from the past. Jerusalem still. Right? And then he wants you to go to Judea. Can you minister to your children? Well, if you have more freedom, you could effectively minister to your children. But the problem with some missionaries is they're not that free. And you send them to different countries. And they do more harm. But if you're free, you can minister to your children. So much freedom that your children, when they grow up, can minister to others. This is what I'm talking about when I say Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. You're able to conquer more. You're expanding your territory. There's more authority. There's greater love. There's greater faith. You're willing to take greater risk. And the natural result of that is that people will come to the Lord. Our church is going to grow in numbers. Community is going to be rich. Our community is going to be reached. Our church will become more diverse. City's going to change. nations to be inherited. Amen.